Well, good evening and welcome to another episode of Investigate Everything. I am Brian O'Shea, your host, and I'm so happy to bring you good news this evening. Now, over the past few months, really, we've seen so many people since Donald Trump and our government started making moves against some of the biggest oil producers in the world. Moves I think are ingenious. And tonight I'm going to explain to you why. Now, what's been going on lately? Okay. When you think about what's happening in Iran, what are the arguments you keep hearing? You keep hearing arguments from Jeffrey Sachs and, Tucker Carlson and pretty much everyone. It's all focused on Israel. Okay. But what they're not doing is they're not looking at the entire global strategy. They probably are. They just don't want you to see that. They want you to think that everything that this administration is doing is to do the bidding of Israel, I think is one of the popular narratives, which is just ludicrous. And it's ludicrous because Israel's a tiny country. They don't have near the power we do, and they probably couldn't exist without us. Okay, and that's just a fact. And I don't want to piss off the Israelis with that, but let's be real here. So I guess the first question would be, why wouldn't Jeffrey Sachs and Tucker Carlson, people who actually understand geopolitics, you don't have to worry about Candace Owens because she doesn't, but people that are in the know or know enough about the world, why aren't they explaining to you why Trump might be doing this? Well, of course, they're against Trump. Why are they against Trump? Because their real clients, the people they really care about, which is not America, are in big trouble. I'm going to explain to you why. And what I'm going to do tonight is I'm just going to read from the Substack I'm working on because that keeps me on track. But if you zoom out, go all the way back to the Zelensky meeting with Donald Trump. Now, that was real. That was a real argument. We remember Rubio sitting there looking sick to his stomach, and Trump's yelling at Zelensky, and Zelensky's kind of being an idiot, saying, give me this, give me this, give me this. But then what happened after that meeting? Did you notice? Well, one thing that happened was we didn't stop Ukraine from continuing to do what they're doing. As a matter of fact, a lot of what they were doing in 2025, which has continued, is hitting a lot of Russian oil infrastructure. Okay, now go all the way to right before Venezuela. Go to October. Where's Marco Rubio? Marco Rubio's kicking around down in South America, meeting with people and coming out, and seemed like nothing was happening, right? And then what happened? Well, then in November, there's a little known thing that happened between the United States and Greece. And that was called, I believe, Operation Poseidon. Why is that important? Well, if you read it in the papers or if you follow Greek news, my son does, he's Greek Orthodox, he's half Greek Orthodox. He's always telling me about, Dad, you got to focus on Greece. I'm always like, come on, no one cares about Greece. But we do. Why do we? Well, because for quite some time, Turkey, who's more closely aligned with China and Russia than they are with Israel or Greece or the United States, has been aggressively trying to go after a lot of territory in the Mediterranean, seemingly to get at the minerals beneath the sea there, right around the nation of Crete, everything like that. That's been a big problem. And Turkey has a sizable military, and they've dumped a lot of money into it. Well, then all of a sudden in November, what happened is we cut a deal with Greece to not only create new flows of oil and LNG, but also to help them with their military and really beef up their military, even conducting military exercises in the Mediterranean, which really, if you think about it, Turkey can't really be running around as I want in the Mediterranean anymore. You'll see why that's important in a second. Then we had Venezuela happen. Okay. Venezuela was key because that cut off a major supply of crude, a kind of crude that most closely matches for mixing with Iranian crude. Okay. Now, the way China and many countries used to circumvent a lot of embargoes or get around buying oil from the United States was to buy oil in bulk from Venezuela and also the very discounted Iranian oil. And these two oils actually mix exceptionally well. And so what was happening is the biggest customer of that type of mix was actually India, because they have the most capable refineries to refine that very heavy crude. Okay. So things are cooking. Okay. We have Russia. They're supplying a lot of LNG to Europe. They're also supplying oil to China through the Siberian, and things are looking really good. And Russia's, they've been in a good spot. Okay. And then all of a sudden we hit Iran. Now, what's going on in Iran? Are we losing? I think we won the minute the Iranians shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Because it's not about, in my opinion, it's not about toppling the government, even though we did that. I mean, for the most part. I mean, no one really knows who the government is now. It's about closing the Strait of Hormuz. And I think it was always about closing the Strait of Hormuz. You see, we don't need that Iranian oil. We never did. And now with Venezuelan oil, we actually are a net exporter of oil for the first time since World War II, I believe, or that time period. We don't need the oil. Everyone else does, but we don't. So let me get right into it. Here's what I think is going on with Trump's global chess game. Why he and we are winning, and why that should matter to every American. Okay. How the United States is quietly strangling our enemies. Oh, gosh. Okay. Give me just a second here. I got the weirdest thing going on. Okay, got it. Sorry, I looked on my X and I saw someone's living room. I thought it was mine. It was just some post I had up. Okay, let me start again. Trump's global chess game. Why he and we are winning, and why it should matter to every American. How the United States is quietly strangling our enemies, particularly Russia and China. This goes way beyond our actions against Iran and includes an entire host of players that very few are talking about. Many claim that the Trump administration doesn't have a plan. Well, if this isn't a plan, then Trump is the luckiest man on earth again. First of all, Russia's got a cash flow problem. In the spring of 2026 now, something strange can be seen happening in the Russian economy. Russia's national wealth fund is collapsing. Now, the national wealth fund is like the country pension. It's like their liquid, really, that they draw off of for military spending and everything else. It has fallen from $55 billion to $47.8 billion in just 4 months, and it's on track to drop below $30 billion by the end of 2026. The war chest, this is the war chest that funds Russia's military, and it's being drained at roughly $5 billion per month. I don't think this is an accident. Since returning to office, the Trump administration has pursued a calculated, multi-layered strategy that is now visibly bearing fruit. The most visible front is Ukraine's, of all people, their relentless drone campaign against the Russian oil infrastructure. Now, I've been against the Ukraine war forever. I believe Donald Trump was as well. But now I'm starting to see that actually works out to our advantage if you are on board with me saying the most important thing is to be the global dominant power of energy. The owner of the energy needs to be the United States. I believe we need to actually achieve peace in this world, but most importantly and first and foremost, our own security. If we control the oil, just like in Dune, if you control the spice, you control life. So what happened is Ukraine, you may recall, they got into this big drone thing. They became very effective with these drone strikes. They kind of pioneered almost a new type of warfare. I mean, it existed, but they really enhanced the mass production of drones and how to use them. It's pretty amazing stuff. At first, these sporadic drone strikes on refineries were just on refineries and depots. By 2024, Ukraine continued with regular attacks on Russian refineries. But the big jump came in the summer of 2025. They went from a handful of strikes per month to dozens. 73 to 81 refinery hits in 2025 alone, plus ports and depots. Ukraine's hit at least 24 different Russian oil refineries with drone strikes since the campaign ramped up back in 2024, including over 80 separate drone attacks on refineries alone in 2025, not counting the dozens of additional attacks by Ukraine on Russian oil depots, export terminals, and pumping stations. These attacks increased dramatically from Ukraine around the same time that the U.S. bombed and obliterated Iran's uranium infrastructure in the summer of 2025. Say that again. The drone strikes hit a peak and really increased right around the same time we bombed the hell out of Iran in the summer of 2025. Since then, if you count how this has affected Russia, these drone strikes, this has taken roughly 20% of Russia's refining and export capacity offline. 20%. In addition to those 2025 refinery hits, it's continued strong into 2026 with fresh attacks just last week on places like Novosibirsk, and Serzan. And I'll put a map up for you in the description. Russian oil production has dropped by nearly 900,000 barrels per day since January 2026, costing Moscow $6 billion in revenue alone this year. This is according to their official website for their economy. At the same time, the Iranian conflict, or the Iran conflict, has pushed China into deeper dependence on Russian oil because the Strait of Hormuz is closed. And even though the Iranians initially closed it, which I think we wanted them to, now we control the Strait of Hormuz. We can't reopen it. There's too many mines, but we can certainly determine who's allowed to go in and at least leave it. Okay. So Beijing, cut off from discounted Iranian barrels, has ramped up purchases from Russia to nearly 2 million barrels per day. While this appears to help Moscow, Ukraine's strikes ensure Moscow cannot actually meet the new demand, forcing it to burn through its sovereign wealth fund at an unsustainable rate. So basically, they can't make enough oil to compete with the demand, and this costs money because they're losing money in the stuff they're not selling. Now, you may recall former NCTC Director Joe Kent and many other critics have repeatedly claimed that China is the real winner of the Iran conflict. But the numbers now show the opposite. China is also paying significantly higher energy and shipping costs. Its factory output has slowed, and it has been forced into greater dependence on a Russia that it itself is struggling. Now, why have those costs gone up? Because they can't get oil directly from the Strait of Hormuz. Things are coming through the Siberian pipelines, and any other oil they're getting from the Saudis, that has to go down and around, sometimes the Horn of Africa. Okay. Meanwhile, the administration has strengthened its position in the Eastern Mediterranean through a strategic partnership with Greece. Greece is now routing American LNG directly to Ukraine. While the U.S., Greek, Ukrainian naval exercises have become routine in the waters Turkey once dominated. You kind of see this chess game playing out? This has visibly constrained Turkey's ability to project power and threaten Israel as they have. So Turkey has been blustering about they're going to, not deal with Israel anymore, but they really can't do anything because now we're very, very active in the Mediterranean with Greece, their sworn enemy. The United States has, and here's another piece, India. The United States has also encouraged India to step into the energy gap, dramatically increasing its purchases of discounted Russian and Venezuelan oil. On the military front, India has also stepped up its naval presence in the South China Sea alongside U.S. forces. Okay, and I think right now, and I'll have to check the numbers as of today, that Venezuelan oil, that we don't control it, but we kind of do. The biggest customer of that right now is India. Billions have also flowed into the oil infrastructure in Midland and Houston. I was just out in Houston. Someone was telling me this back then. I didn't believe them. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like they were ready for it. Positioning America to capture market share as its rivals struggle. Many analysts and Trump critics insisted there was no coherent plan, that the administration was simply chaotic and reactive. The emerging results suggest they were very mistaken. Russia's war economy is cracking, China is absorbing real economic pain, Turkey's regional ambitions have been checked, and India is moving closer to the U.S. orbit. One senior official described the approach bluntly. We don't need to fight them directly. We just need to make sure they stay chained to each other while we control the exits. For months into 2026, the board looks very different than what the critics predicted. Trump's global chess game appears to be working. That's my working copy right now, and I have much more detail than that. But before we get started on that, I got a lot of comments. Let me put those up. Welcome, everyone, and this is going to be more of a Q&A. But because there's so much to go through, but I will, what I'll do is I'll take your questions and then refer to my notes so I can answer them for you. So if you want me to go deeper into the wealth fund, what that means, I've got that all up in front of me. It is vacation week with the kids, and my son has been occupying my time, so I'm not completely prepared, but you will have a full copy of this, and I'll add in a lot of the graphics to the recording, but I just wanted to reach out to you on a live because we haven't done so in a few days. All right, so first comment. Hey, how's it going, Kay? How are you doing, buddy? I want your opinion on the Iran war in 2013. I think being in America First was all about fighting around one day, maybe one day, or if we can try to figure out how to. Perhaps. Because she goes on, I feel like groups like the Creepers and Libertarians, they adopt communist wordplay, but they don't know what they are doing, and they don't know the real. Yeah, I get it. And by the way, Kay is on a machine that is typed into, so just please excuse if it's difficult for you to read. And Kay, I hope you don't mind me sharing that. Goes on, people like Michael Yon and other people. Like Emerald Robinson that are against the war in Iran, they don't understand the ideology of America First. Okay, so I know what you're saying. So, and you bring up a good point, and I'm glad you did. So it sounds like what you're saying is, where is this America First attitude? I mean, people say America First, but do they really know what that means, and are they really on board with it? It's been my opinion that this country has been almost culturally trained to not want to be number one. It wasn't the case after World War II, but this kind of guilt at like, oh my gosh, we can't be the global superpower. That's bad. No, that's good. That's good because you don't want anyone else being the global superpower. We don't believe in equity, okay? We believe, in meritocracy, and we've earned our position at the top. And if anyone's going to be at the top holding that kind of power, I want it to be the United States. Because despite our faults like all countries have, we are easily the best country that humankind has ever had in terms of civil liberties, human rights, the freedom of religion. I know a lot of idiots say, oh, we're not really free, we're enslaved. Are you really enslaved? Anyone that says that has clearly never been to another country, or they've only gone to the Sheraton or the Sofitel in those other countries and never really went to those other countries. And yeah, and I hear what you say about like Emerald Robinson and Michael Yon. First of all, none of them are experts. Okay, Michael Yon's not a geopolitical expert. He's, he's had some good moments during the border crisis, but I think a lot of people are stepping out of their lane. I'm not claiming to be a geopolitics expert, but I did spend 2.5 decades as an intelligence analyst in the intel community, looking at all these places, both strategically and tactically. So I do have a world view on these things, and it's what I continue to do today, mainly for private clients who are looking for areas they might want to invest in. Okay, family banks, that sort of thing. That's why I look at the geopolitical picture all the time. So I need to try to predict what's going to happen there. Okay, so, but I hear what you're saying. There, you have all these people who are against the war. But have you noticed, Kay, that they are all talking off the same script? Now, I went into this on my last episode. It seems to me that a lot of these people are parroting the words of Alexander Dugin and ultimately Tsargrad television empire out there in Russia. Why would they be doing that? Well, they're probably getting paid. But the other reason is this whole Iran strategy, this America first vision of the world, this unipolar vision of the world that the Trump administration is turning into a reality, that really disrupts the plans for something called the multipolar world. Now, what is the multipolar world? That is the plan by the Russians made, mainly, that say we should cede power as the United States and have our own little quadrant, our own little region of the world, and then Russia will have theirs and China will have theirs. Venezuela, well, not anymore. But Iran, no, not anymore. But their friends will have other regions, and then we'll all live in peace as long as we stay in our regions. Here's the problem with that plan. It's a sucker's plan, okay, because they're all allies. We're the odd man out. We would never be so stupid, okay? Now, when I hear people who are so against the war, I hear them talking, and most of them, I mean, it's like the game of telephone. Like most of them, they just don't know what they're talking about. They just don't know. I'm very disappointed at my friend Brandon Weichard, who's still my friend, and I respect him greatly, but I think the problem is for those who are legitimately concerned about Trump's plan, they're kind of looking at warfare through the lens of traditional war planners. Okay, I know Brandon's worked around, the Department of Defense as a geopolitical analyst, and I take nothing away from him. He's incredible. But the only way to analyze what Trump might be doing is to look at historical examples of other leadership. The problem is there is no historical precedent for Donald Trump because he doesn't come from the same world. Okay, and he looks at things kind of in a very business way of like, okay, we need to own the market. That's it. And he has the tools to do it. And I was shocked when a lot of people said, oh, they were so stupid, the Trump administration, they didn't know that the Iranians were going to close the Strait of Hormuz. Come on. That's the only card they have. Of course they knew they were going to close the Strait of Hormuz. That's why I think that was part of the plan. Get them to close the Strait of Hormuz. Now, at the end of the episode, I'll play an Instagram that Trump said, and I could read it to you now because I was putting myself through my weekly torture ritual of reading the Boston Globe because I'm in Massachusetts this week. But does it seem like Trump's in any rush to open the Strait of Hormuz? No. Why would he? That literally, it's kind of like this. Let's say Iran had a lemonade stand and they had their whole neighborhood over there. And they beat people up if they didn't buy their lemonade. And people didn't really like them. And their lemonade employees hated them because if they didn't pick enough lemons, they got shot. And then, of course, the United States is over in the other neighborhood, and they got a lemonade stand. It's very good lemonade. No better, no worse than the Iranian lemonade. Okay. And we keep getting complaints saying, hey, these guys are real jerks. They're really messing it up for everyone. Can you do something? We're like, no, we can't do something. And then, of course, Israel's saying, no, really do something because we want to ensure our security. We're like, cool your jets. But then we see an opportunity. And what is that opportunity? Okay, that opportunity, I don't even know if you call it an opportunity. It's more like the clock is ticking. Because let's face the facts, we're not going to do great in the midterms unless some things turn around and people get out there to vote. If we lose in the midterms to the Democrats, we being Republicans or conservatives, I think of myself more as an America First guy because I don't really like the legacy Republican Party, but I'll vote for them before I vote for the only other choice we have, and I will always vote. But I think what Trump was looking at is we've got to get this done, meaning we have got to solidify our position in the world as the dominant global energy supplier to the world, because if we don't, then the China-Russia access, Iran access will. And then we'll be right back to where we were decades ago, playing patty cake with all these terrorist nations, having more attacks on us. And guys, let's not forget, people act like there were no terrorist attacks before Donald Trump, or some people act like there were no wars before the United States came along in the world and later Israel came along. It's ridiculous. I think Trump understands two things, among many. The world understands strength, okay? The world outside the United States and the EU and Canada. They understand one thing, that's strength. China, strength. Iran, strength. Look at the Houthis. The Houthis, they've been pretty quiet. You know why? Because we showed that we'll blow them away, and we pounded the hell out of them right before this happened, probably by design. And the Houthis usually fight on the strongest side because the strongest side usually has the most money. Okay, and they've even fought for the Israelis before, but a lot of people didn't know that. So, anyways, we get back to the point. So that's what the world understands is strength, and we've got the oil. We've got control of the Strait of Hormuz. We control access to it, not the Iranians. Okay, yes, they have mines in there, but let's not forget they really don't have much of a navy. They've got these little mosquito boats. And people are like, why don't we just blow those away? Why? I mean, Iran's doing our job for us. They're keeping it closed. The longer they keep it closed, a few things happen. Iran can only store so much oil. I think they can store like maybe a few weeks worth. To the point where back in April last year, the Chinese even stopped buying as much from them because they couldn't produce and store enough for China's needs. And let's not forget that, like, even though Iran and Russia seem like they're on the same side, they're still oil competitors for China's business, for India's business. So, they can't store the oil. Now, what happens to these oil pumps and these rigs when they stop pumping oil? Well, there's condensation, there's all sorts of things that happen, and it really starts degrading the entire infrastructure. Healthy oil infrastructure means it's pumping oil. It's pumping it out, storing it, it's being shipped out, pumping, storing, shipping. Well, if Iran can't ship their oil anywhere, they've got to shut off their pumps. That pressure that pushes the oil out of the ground is building. They've got to bleed that off. Do they have the people to do that? And eventually, it costs billions of dollars in damages if these rigs stay shut for too long. We're talking several weeks, not several months. So Iran's in a pickle because it's also one of their major sources of income. And there's nothing coming out right now. Now, it might seem like Russia, that's a good deal for them. Their competitors offline, sure, in the short term. But you see, they can't provide the supply to meet the demand. So what happens when Russia can't supply India, for instance, with the oil they need because they can't get it from Iran anymore? They go to the United States. What happens when Europe can't really buy too much Russian oil because they sanction them. Russia will gladly sell it to them, but they sanction them. And it's, kind of like, I don't want to say taboo because that sounds like I'm simplifying it, but they don't really want to. It's not politically sound to buy things from Russia in the EU because of all the rhetoric and war talk coming out of the EU and vice versa all these years. That's okay. In we come. We set up some deals in the Mediterranean, and now we're supplying right up to Ukraine. And other people are getting on board in the EU. Now the EU has curtailed energy usage to try to deal with the shortages because they were getting a lot of oil from, sounds like Iran and everyone else that ships oil through there, like the Gulf states. But the point is, we're happy to sell them the oil. Okay, we got plenty. We got plenty of lemonade. So that's how you have to look at this. So the longer the strait stays closed, the better it is for us. And it's a horrible situation for Russia. Let me explain in a minute so I can finish this up. So, KC, did that answer your question? I'm for Casey Bush, and I don't really like... Yeah, I'm not really following who's running and stuff right now, but... We'll get to the influencers on another episode. I want to stay on track, though. So, Jennifer Lynn Monroe. Hello, Jennifer Lynn Monroe. Tell your wife I said hi. My wife has a lot of fans, Naomi Wolf, and I certainly will, Jennifer Lynn Monroe. And thanks for joining the show. Okay, hash, thank you very much. What are you talking about, Michael Young, in this idea of somebody can say China can get oil from? Well, I haven't seen that, but there's only so many. Yes, there's other oil producers. Let me see if I can pull those up. So, give me just a second here. Yeah, there's others they can get it from. They can get it from Russia. They do get it from Russia. They always have gotten a lot of oil from Russia. They can still get it from... Well, I don't know the sanctions, so I don't want to speak on that because I don't know. But what I will say is it's harder for them to get it, and we're putting a stranglehold on it. Okay, because don't forget that we also now have a military deal as of last month with the Indonesians, which means we're going to have a lot of military vessels running around the Strait of Malacca, another import shipping lane for China. So you see, we're kind of isolating China, kind of squeezing them, strangling them, as I said in my title. But let me see. Here's my honest take. China supplies component. That's well, yeah. And here's another thing from I got a ton of notes here. I think I've been trying to figure out why China would be supplying a lot of the key components for drones to Ukraine. Okay, that to me is a little strange. I mean, I think China is making money on that, but even though Ukraine makes their own drones, they more assemble their own drones, but they get those key components, the majority of them, from China. But China's an ally of Russia, and those drones are causing Russia a lot of headaches. So what's going on there? I don't know. I mean, maybe it helps China keep Russia in check, even though they're allies. They've always been like an abusive marriage. And that's another one. Anyone can send me a lead on that, any articles. I gave up on that question because it was just taking too long to answer. Because China also supplies Russia. They give them a lot of indirect support, a lot of dual-use goods. And they've also sent over 300 million worth of drone parts to Russia. So they're arming both sides of that conflict. They're keeping that going. But they started doing that prior to the Iran conflict. Now they've got a problem because you have customers, they're paying customers, Russia and Ukraine, but now the very oil they're relying on, a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it that comes from Russia, is now being hampered by Ukraine, mainly through their drone strikes, which China supplies key components for. So we'll have to put a bookmark in that and get back to it. And China has increased significantly its imports of Russian oil and gas since the Iran conflict began. In the first 3 months, actually, China's imports of Russian crude jumped 18% compared to the same period before. That's a lot. Gas imports through the Power of Siberia pipeline also rose sharply, hitting record volumes in February and March. So that's good and bad. Again, Russia, I don't think they can keep supplying that amount of oil. Okay, so so they've increased their seaborne crude. China's imports their seaborne crude from, it looks like, just looking at the print.in, an Indian publication, and also the Financial Post. I mean, they've had a major jump. Russian crude oil running from around 1.2 to 1.4 million barrels a day late last year. Then it jumped from 1.7 in January 2026 and hit a record 2.1 million barrels a day in February. That's up over 40% from the last 40%. I mean, almost a 50% jump. March came in at 2.37 million barrels per day. And oh my God. And then in April, so far, it looks like they've hit a total of 8.4 million barrels per day coming in from Russia. 27% jump from April the same time last year. Okay, so it's a significant increase, which, again, if you can produce that, that's great. But if not, that's a problem. And why did they increase that? Well, because they can't get the cheap pirated mix of Venezuelan and Iranian oil anymore. Okay, so that's a big problem for them. And right now, Russia is kind of seen as one of the biggest short-term winners of the Iranian conflict. They've increased the price of oil to China, which will put strains on their relations. Their remaining oil now is worth way more because global supplies are tightening. And then Russia's getting less scrutiny on pressure in Ukraine from the West. And not, because we're also not paying attention to what Ukraine's doing, and we're not really stopping them because it serves our interests. Okay, so Russia supplies 22% of China's total imports right now. Early this year, it was around 21%, so it is moving up, and it's been hovering right around that 22% for the last month or two. For natural gas, Russia is China's largest supplier, but only accounts for about 10 to 12% of China's total gas consumption. It's higher if you look at imports. Overall, Russia is important but not dominant for China. And it goes on. And China gets, looks like 18%, 20% from Russia, another 15% from Saudi Arabia. Malaysia comes in third at about 11%, Iraq at 11%, Brazil at 8%. And they have great relations with Brazil. And then the rest is split among smaller suppliers. Let me go through my notes here because I'm trying to fill in these blanks from the paper. So, again, here we go. So, Europe is buying, who the Europeans are buying now instead of from Russia is United States does about 22%. Norway is a big supplier to Europe at 18%. Saudi Arabia 11%. United Kingdom 9%. Kazakhstan at 8%. For natural gas, the top suppliers for LNG are the United States, coming in at 48%, followed by Norway and Qatar 23%, and then 8% respectively. And then we see the trend increasing. So China's increasing their demand. Europe has lowered their demand, but increased their demand from us, which is good for us. That's also good for our economy because that means the oil companies are getting more income. And yes, I know Exxon didn't pay any tax 1 year, but we also know that we will be getting that income tax, that revenue tax from the oil companies, and they're glad to pay it because they're producing so much. There's so much investment going on right now in the Texas oil fields because we are getting that. We're trying to refit to process that Venezuelan crude. In the meantime, we're selling off the surplus to India. But I'm sorry, Venezuela is not us. Wink, wink. Okay, so I wanted to talk about what I said about the Venezuelan oil mixing. So Venezuelan crude is very heavy, very thick, and high in sulfur. Iranian crude is also heavy, but has a different chemical profile. When you blend them together, they complement each other really well. The mixture becomes easier and cheaper to refine in many modern refineries. Because the Venezuelan crude alone, it will just gum up most refineries. You mix it with a little of that Iran, it's a perfect mix. This is exactly why China and the other buyers have been doing it for years, buying cheap from Venezuela, buying cheap from Iran, mixing them together. They buy both the Venezuelan, Iranian oil at a deep discount. Then they blend the two cargoes together at sea or in storage before sending them to mix in their refineries. It's a common practice in the sanctions busting world. And they also had the shadow fleets, which are like the kind of like black market of oil, supplying a lot of oil to China. Venezuelan and Iranian oil are chemically a very, very good match, according to multiple sources. And then the other part I wanted to talk about, so the increase in infrastructure. So there's been a huge increase starting in July of 2025 when we first started hitting Iran. I think the oil industry, kind of picked up and ran with that. But companies like Energy Transfer are pouring billions into new natural gas processing plants and pipelines. And if you go out there, you could see it all happening. They're spending 5 to 5.5 billion on growth projects in 2026. 5 to 5.5 billion. With major focus right now on Midland, which is, if you watch Landman, that's all shot in Midland, Texas. I highly recommend watching Landman. Just, if anything else, have an appreciation for the oil industry, but you can learn a few things from it. I hope they do another season. I love that show. In Houston, the big story is pipeline expansions and higher utilization of existing systems, bringing more premium crude online. This is from MRT.com and ZEHlaw.com that I'm reading from. In Houston, the big story is the pipeline expansion and higher utilization of existing systems, bringing more Permian crude into the area. Several major pipelines are running near full capacity, and companies are investing in the NGL pipelines, fractionation, and export infrastructure to handle the increased flow. Overall, the trend is upward for U.S. oil, especially on midstream pipelines and processing, rather than just new drilling rigs. So they're not like looking for oil, they're just looking to process oil they already have or oil that's coming in. The Iran conflict and tighter global supply have made these investments way more attractive. So if you look at the oil stocks, they're doing really well. Big increase here. I'm going to skip that. I've got some great maps for you guys. Okay, so now let's talk about the current state of the Venezuelan oil industry. So as of April 2026, and just so you know, my same sources, production is running at about 920,000 barrels per day, up slightly from last year, but still far below its historic peaks. Really poor infrastructure, still crumbling, is not really well taken care of by the previous Venezuelan governments. Many of the fields and refineries are in bad shape due to the years of underinvestment and sanctions. And by the way, those are the things we built that they stole from us. Right now they're producing about 920,000 a day. They're exporting about 650 to 700,000 a day. Their biggest exports go to, the biggest buyer right now is China. And that's changed. And that's why China has had to increase their buying from Russia, because they used to be a big buyer of Venezuelan oil. As of March 2026, production, they're doing about 1.9 million barrels a day. Exports hit, okay, they're both exporting, largest buyer. Yeah, so India has become the largest buyer of Venezuelan oil, okay, and our relations with India have never been better. And I'll put those charts in the description for you. Why has India stepped in? They needed the oil. India is the world's largest, third largest oil importer and always looking for cheap crude. They get a deep discount on the Venezuelan oil. I'm sure we had a part in that, making sure that India gets cheap oil. Okay, now, why do we care? If you don't know the relations between India and China, they really don't like each other, to say the least. But since December of 2025, the relationship between India and the United States has actually improved a little bit. And there's been no negative shifts. Trade and defense cooperation have continued to grow. The U.S. and India have just completed another round of joint military exercises in March. The big positive development is the U.S. has been relatively quiet on India's continued purchase of the discounted Venezuelan oil. There's been no new sanctions by us against India or public criticisms. And both of us are looking to counter China in the Indo-Pacific geopolitically. Overall, it's the smoothest periods of relationships in the last few years. The Trump administration appears they've taken a pretty pragmatic approach with India, prioritizing strategic partnership over lecturing them on oil purchases like the Biden administration used to do. India's also been increasing its presence in the South China Sea. This according to several sources. Let me see here. AEI.org, which is the American Economic Institute, I believe, up in Great Barrington. They've been quietly increasing their presence in the South China Sea over the past few months. Since late 2025, the Indian Navy ships have been conducting more frequent freedom of navigation patrols in the South China Sea. At least 4 documented patrols between December and April. They've also increased joint naval exercises with the Philippines, Vietnam, and the U.S. in those waters. The Philippines is significant because the Philippines have been suffering from huge harassment and outright attacks by the Chinese Navy, where they even had a hand-to-hand melee combat on one of their vessels last year, where like one of the Indian SEALs lost a finger. I'll get the videos for you. It's crazy. Like they were going at each other literally with hatchets on the open seas. The Indian government frames it as protecting freedom of navigation and its own commercial shipping interests, but it's clearly part of a broader strategy to push back against Chinese expansion. This move serves as a signal that if China moves on Taiwan, India is willing to create pressure elsewhere. So you kind of see check. We got the pieces all moving where we want them. All right, so let's go into some other parts of my paper here, just so I can explain them. Let me sit up so my wife doesn't tell me to sit up. So we have the relations going good. And again, going back to Ukraine and Russia, the drone attacks cannot be understated. I mean, 20% of Russia's ability to produce oil. Horrible for Russia, really, really puts us in a great position. Now, as a result of this, you're seeing a lot more meetings between Beijing and the Russians. So Lavrov met with the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi on April 14th, 15th, and then with Xi Jinping. Lavrov explicitly told the Chinese side that Russia is ready to fill China's energy gap caused by the Iran conflict and the disruption of the Middle East oil flows. And the increase in imports and exports has shown that. They talked about the Iran war. I'm reading this off the Chinese socialistchina.org and the MOFA, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from China. So yeah, Russia said, we got you, we'll pump your oil, but they're losing infrastructure as well up in Russia. They talked about the Iran war, the Ukrainian situation, and how Russia can step in and be a reliable supplier of global shipping if global shipping routes are blocked. I don't know if they can, because so they're basically saying, hey, China, we got you. If those Americans try to block shipping lanes, we'll take care of that. But can they? Because they weren't that effective when they tried to come to Cuba's aid. And then the Chinese themselves haven't done anything. Like they do a lot of yelling and screaming, and so do the Russians. But really, have they really helped their allies at all? Cuba, Venezuela? No. Iran? No. So, and I love the Chinese language, the way that it's very flowery. Xi called the China-Russia relationship precious in the current chaotic environment and pushed for even closer coordination. That's the situation with them. So, what else do we have here? Okay, just have some stats on oil. Let me scroll down through this. I got some great heat maps for you guys too. Got the increases. Okay, Russia short answer. Let me see. Russia's crude oil production. All right, I want to get away from oil because I don't want to put you to sleep on this Friday night. Let's get to the juicy stuff. Okay, let's talk about Russia's National Wealth Fund. This is significant. All right, so let me just start at the beginning here. Okay, so the National Wealth Fund is running out faster than most people realize. This is like everything. This is their pension. This is, if they run out of money, they're going to have people lose their retirements, everything. And this is what Russia's been dipping into to this. It's kind of like the cash reserve, right? Well, they've been dipping into this, especially for the Ukrainian war, and to try to deal with these attacks on their oil refineries. At the current burn rate, Russia's liquid portion of the National Wealth Fund, meaning the cash portion, it's likely to be exhausted by late 2027 or early 2028. Here's the breakdown. The easily accessible part of the fund currently sits at around $68 billion. Okay, converted. Russia's currently draining that at about $3 billion a month, as I said earlier, and that is accelerating. If the Ukraine attacks continue at this pace, that $68 billion will last roughly 22 to 24 months. Once that liquid money is gone, Russia will be forced to either A, cut military spending dramatically, or print more rubles, which would cause serious inflation. The more money you print, if you're not the prime currency, the less it's worth. You may remember the, Argentine down in Argentina before the current president got in. Even Tucker Carlson was down there showing how he had to have a shopping bag full of money just to have enough money to get around because it was just so worthless. So the oil infrastructure attacks aren't just hurting the current revenue. They're slowly starving Russia's ability to fund war long term. Now, here's the silver lining there. We have the ability, now that we own, and we do control the Strait of Hormuz, and we can also shut Ukraine down pretty easily. We could just make them stop. Okay, and we can. Well, Russia's been reluctant to sign a deal, and I know the terms aren't always what they want. I know in the past the UK and a lot of the EU have disrupted plans for peace that I know Putin and Zelensky may have come to. I won't say would have, but may have. And no, I don't like Zelensky now. I don't trust him as far as I could throw him, which could be further than the average person because he looks very small. But the point is, this drain on Russia's National Wealth Fund can actually force Russia to the table to end that war. Okay? And again, because Ukraine is very reliant on the United States for military aid, more than any other country in the world, we have leverage over them. Okay, so for all the idiots that seem to think that, we give all this money to Israel, I think we give them like $3 billion and change a year for aid, which they spend mostly on military. We're still giving Ukraine like $17.8 billion, I think. That gives you a lot of leverage. So by draining the Russian side and really putting a strain on their finances, we can leverage that to force a peace deal, and we can leverage what we give to Ukraine, which is more than we give to any other country in military in aid alone. We can force them, or they don't get any more aid. It's that simple. And I think that's really another play here, is to force both of them to the table. And we now finally have the leverage over Russia both from the Ukrainian attacks and letting those continue, and also the strain on the oil infrastructure and their loss of, they lost a competitor, but they gained one in Venezuela who used to be side by side with them. So that's something to watch. But here's a breakdown just of how much they're losing. January 1st, 2026, the liquid portion of the National Wealth Fund of Russia was 88 billion. March 1st, 77 billion. April 23rd, as of yesterday when I wrote this, 68 billion. So 88 to 68 billion since January. $20 billion drop in less than 4 months. That's the current rate of about 4.4 to 5 billion drained per month. 4 to 5 billion drained per month from a fund that now has about 68 billion left in it. And the fund is falling roughly 1.3 to 1.6 million every single day. 1.3 to 1.6 every single day. So it basically creates a ticking clock for Russia. They've got to figure something out quickly. They got to figure out how to either circumvent our strategy or make a deal and come to the table and see what we'll do for them. So you get it. Okay, so, and again, once it's gone, they've got like a few options. Like if their wealth fund runs out, they can print more rubles, but their inflation will go through the roof. Their economy will implode. They could cut military spending. That's a viable option. But that would mean slowing down or even losing ground to Ukraine. Putin is very unlikely to do this, and we've seen he's very unlikely to do this because someone will try to unseat him, if you know what I mean. And they can also take on massive new debt, which then leads them right back into the China debt trap. They could borrow heavily from the international market or China, but because of the sanctions, they would have to pay extremely high rates. So basically, they only have a few options. The Russians only have a few options to go to get money. Okay, China's a big one. But with no one else offering or able to give Russia money. And let's not forget, the EU can't really lend that much money because they don't have that much money anymore. They have to go to China, and that's kind of like the mafia. Like, okay, yeah, we'll give you a good rate. We'll give you a good rate. 18.9. It's like, China's like the global, to Russia, they're like the global, like, payday loans. A lot of analysts are saying, according to Forbes, a lot of analysts are saying that they're going to do some modest spending cuts and they're going to print more money. Not good. That would weaken the Russian economy significantly by late 2027 or 2028. So we're getting towards the end of Trump's term with those years. So this is where I think this is really ingenious of the Trump administration to do. This is like pushing a boulder up a hill with our enemies. Once they get to a certain point, it doesn't really matter what a woke, crazy left-wing government tries to do because the ship has sailed. The economy's crashed. Military spending has died. People have left. China's cut new deals with new countries, which really disrupts everyone's plans. So even if Trump gets hamstrung by a Democratic Congress, as long as these moves are made and we've drained the Russian fund, okay, and we've solidified our relationships with both India, the EU, and now Canada. We have a new oil energy deal going with them, some pipeline running through the western part of the country. That bill was just signed last week, I believe. It doesn't matter. The deals are in place. I mean, it matters, but the deals are in place. So the Democrats or the crazy, whoever gets in, or the rhinos, they can't really mess it up that bad because they can't really do anything to it. So that's good. That's really good forward thinking for a guy who supposedly has no plan. But here's how the Iran conflict has been a real drag on China's economy. Spike in oil prices, Brent crude, which is the standard, jumped from $68 a barrel in December to over $92 in April. High energy costs are squeezing Chinese factories and transportation. And also LNG is a big thing too, because that's how that's how you produce electricity is with natural gas, pushing those turbines. This also constricts China's ability to really ramp up their AI, because you need those massive data centers which draw a lot of power. If you don't have the LNG coming in, because China doesn't really make a lot of its own energy, they import most of it. If they don't have enough LNG to power the new plants to run these data centers, they can't really expand their AI as quickly. And then we can win in that race as well. It also slows down their manufacturing. China lives on their manufacturing and exports. It's really, really, really hurting their economy badly, which makes them less of a threat and reduces their ability to aggressively go after non-Belt and Road countries and allies of the United States. So that's a good thing. Now, this goes into Joe Kent. I'm trying to cover a lot of bases here, so I'll wrap it up here soon. Let's talk about Joe Kent. First of all, Joe Kent is not a geopolitical expert. He was a Green Beret, great, did great service, can't take that away from him. Then he was in charge of the National Counterterrorism Center. Okay, what is that? There's many centers like this that were set up after 9/11. NCTC is one of them. It's one of several, actually, under the DNI, or the Director of National Intelligence. It was a way to break down silos in the intelligence community. So what it essentially is you got CIA, DIA, NSA, DOE, some state and local input, FBI, and they all share intelligence, and is shared through the National Counterterrorism Center as it relates to terrorism. And then they kind of act as a train conductor to make sure that intel gets to the people that need it. That's it. It's important, but it's not they're not a decision-making agency. They're not a collection agency. They're not planning missions. They are making sure the right intel gets the right people to counter terrorism. They're not investigators. No one stopped Joe Kent from investigating Charlie Kirk's murder, because that's not what they do. They have no mandate to investigate anything, not to mention it was an aggravated murder case at the state level. So Joe Kent's full of it when he talks about that. But also, Joe Kent, he basically said that China was the biggest beneficiary of the conflict in Iran. And if you've heard Joe Kent, he said this numerous times. I don't know, except for what he could read maybe in The Economist, I guess, which is, a rag, where he's getting this from. But they're actually the biggest net loser, China is, from the Iran conflict, not the biggest beneficiary. Here's why. China is paying much higher prices for oil. They went from buying heavily discounted Iranian crude to paying nearly premium prices for Russian oil. Their shipping costs have exploded because the chaos in the Strait of Hormuz has changed their shipping lanes. Their manufacturing and export growth slowed sharply in first quarter 2026, I think by 18%. They've been forced into even greater dependence on a weakening Russia, which itself is struggling with the Ukrainian attacks. Russia is the real beneficiary short term. China is absorbing higher costs and supply chain pain. That is their bread and butter, is supply chain and manufacturing and exporting cheap goods. And the other thing is, I just don't see how China is benefiting really at all from this conflict. They're the net loser. And then here's I tried to do a side-by-side comparison with what this would look like with and without the Iranian conflict for Russia, for their economic situation. So without the Iran conflict, they would be producing much less oil. They'd be producing about 11 million barrels per day less. With the Iran conflict, they're producing about 20 million more than that. Okay, they're without the Iran conflict, they're making much less in oil revenue. They're making a lot more now. But here's their biggest problem: without the Iran conflict, their national wealth fund would be up about 10 billion more than it is. And then with the Iranian conflict, we know that it's currently sitting at 68 billion. It would be at about 78 billion without it. Also, their GDP is taking significant hit. It's with the Iran conflict, the GDP of the Russian Federation is about 2.7 worse than it could be. Okay. And then their expected GDP growth without the Iranian conflict, based on last year's numbers, was about 1.4%. With the Iranian conflict, that's down to 0.3%. So it's really, really hurt Russia, and that's good for us. Okay, so, and then for the, and so there's that, and then Russia's national wealth fund liquid portion. Okay, so here's another one. So actual 55 billion. So without the Iran conflict, they'd be about the same in January, 55 billion. April 2026, the current, like I said earlier, they're down about 16 billion than they would have been were there no Iranian conflict. It goes on and on. So their runway, like they would have been able to live off the National Wealth Fund for about 4 more years without the Iran conflict and the Venezuela sanctions. They get about 4 more years of runway. With Venezuela gone and the Iran conflict, Strait of Hormuz closed, they have about 7 to 8 months of runway. So they would have had 4 years. They got 7 to 8 months of runway. Okay, these are just estimates, but they are based off of other people's estimates and their projections from their own government sites. All right, so there's that, and then I just want to make sure I covered everything that's in my paper. And again, this will be in my final draft, so you'll have it, just so you can take a look at that when you get a chance. So you guys see what this is doing. This, going back to the paper, going back to what I was saying, you notice at no time did I mention Israel except with regard to Turkey. Why? Because they're not a big customer of anything. Okay, they're not the reason we're in this conflict. We're in this conflict, and I think the sole reason was to shut down the Strait of Hormuz and make ourselves the go-to place, the net exporter of oil and natural gas for the world. And we're quickly heading in that direction. We already have deals opening in Europe. We have the Russians getting pounded, their oil refineries getting pounded, and even if you don't believe what Ukraine says, you don't need to. Just look at the numbers in the industry worksheets. They don't lie. Okay? Look at China's export numbers. They don't lie. They match up with this. This is where I sourced all this from. And I sourced it against the timing of the Iran conflict and the loss of the Venezuelan oil for Russia and China mainly. And the numbers add up. And this is why people are losing their minds about this war. The Tucker Carlsons and the people that clearly are towing the multipolar line, probably for money, they don't know what to do. Okay, they don't know what to do because we're not going to stop. There's not really much to do, as Donald Trump said. He's just not in any rush. He's going to sit back and wait. We don't have to wait that long because those Iranian refineries eventually will shut themselves down for good. And then it all works out for us. You're seeing a shift also in the messaging from the multipolar, the woke right, to other things happened. The Iran conflict is going our way because it's not, in my opinion, about defeating Iran. We don't want to own Iran. We just want to close the strait, in my opinion. But the other thing that is really interesting timing is I did notice a dramatic shift in messaging this week of the woke right, the people we're talking about, really got a lot more quiet. And what happened over this weekend, Monday, I believe, into Monday? Oh, that's right. The Southern Poverty Law Center got hit with a bunch of indictments from Kash Patel and the FBI. Now, I'm not saying causation and correlation are matched up here. I am just saying you can't help but notice a coincidence. And then hat tip to Laura Loomer. I was watching her show earlier. She also noticed that Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes both canceled their podcasts this week and are both in Italy at the Vatican. And then we had the Pope, who was condemned, kind of, towing the woke line against Trump, saying you got to stop these wars. And, I think Trump basically said the right thing, mind your own business. I am no fan of this Pope, not from the get-go. And I am Roman Catholic. I am a confirmed Catholic. I have a right to say this if I want to, So I've never been a fan of him. He's done more trips to China than anywhere else before he became the Pope. He's done nothing except toe the line for the Chinese version of Catholicism in China. He's not speaking out against it at all. He apparently carried a picture around of some dead kid from some African country that turned out not to be dead. I think the guy's a total communist. I can't stand this Pope. I don't like this Pope, and I'll be glad when he has another job. And he's just so political against the United States, and he's American. But be careful when you start seeing some of these woke right talking about Trump being the most anti-Catholic president ever, which is bonkers. And what I did notice with the influencers, if you could call them that, they started pulling up where the FBI and the DOJ is going after Catholic charities for fraud and possible human trafficking. Well, Catholic Charities was instrumental in the human trafficking around Biden's open border. J.J. Carroll and myself, who are on different sides of a lot of arguments, we had a show together back then called Unrestricted Invasion, and we hammered, and J.J., he'll be the first to tell you, Catholic Charities is one of the main vessels for which this kind of fraud and human trafficking has been occurring. And other religious groups too, like Jewish Family, not religious groups, but NGOs that bear the name of a religion, I should say. But like Jewish Families, Catholic Charities, so many of them. I think, honestly, those, their religious labeling is kind of like their beard. All of those NGOs involved with the border, the open border, they're all scumbags. Because under their watch, a lot of children have gone missing and still have not been found. They were the ones facilitating getting people to the buses, getting their plane tickets. Hernando Arce, another good guy on the border reporting, great guy. He was down there watching it and recording it, and great reporting. So when you hear things like, oh, Trump's going after Catholic Charities, so he hates the Catholic Church, first of all, they're two different things. And second of all, of course they're going after Catholic Charities because that's what we asked him to do, and he should. Catholic Charities is horrible, and they're corrupt, and they're disgusting, and they even had one Hunter Biden on one of their boards one time. I will pull the paper. I found that a long time ago, and I couldn't believe it. So don't believe the hype. Trump's not anti-Catholic. He's not anti-any religion. He is America first, and he is delivering on those promises. He is going after the corruption, and you see it happening. You want to figure out who they're going after next. Just see who attacks Kash Patel. I mean, look what happened. It's like right before Kash Patel announces his indictments on the Southern Poverty Law Center, The Atlantic comes out with an article about his drinking, and he's got a drinking problem. And all the sources for the entire article are anonymous. And they're ridiculous, too. Like, Dan Bongino was his deputy, but they never contacted Dan Bongino, according to Dan Bongino. You would think that'd be a good source. Dan Bongino's a private citizen now. They never did. It's a total hit piece. And it goes to show you like how all these things are tied together. The same people attacking Kash Patel, Atlantic, and the Atlantic Council, the same people attacking him are the same people attacking Donald Trump about Iran, Venezuela, Cuba. And then it's because it's defeating several different plans, and I won't get into it tonight because it's too confusing, because there are competing plans at that Titan level being like the Soros Open Societies network, apparatus, the Dugan multipolar network apparatus. These are two different ideologies, so people know. A lot of people say the left and the right are coming together, and that's not true. There's what I call the Soros network, which is open borders, no sovereignty, global, we're all citizens of the world ideology, and that's where Soros benefits the most in that kind of situation. Kind of a global currency, digital currency, control. You'll have nothing and be happy. That's the Soros network. The multipolar network, they're actually a little different. They're highly nationalist. They believe more in nationalism, but you stay in your sphere, we're going to stay in ours. But we are not going to cede anything to our enemy countries because they think it's fair. And what's ironic, I think, about the multipolar people, and I hope Dugan hears this, they're not communists, but they can't get out of that communist way of thinking. Because if you think about this, right now the United States has the most power and influence in the world. We've earned it. We've earned it. But yet the multipolarists or multipolar people, they want us to cede our power so that everyone can have equal shares of power around the world. Does that sound like equity to you guys? Sounds like equity to me. So they're more communist than they think. And go back to my last episode and watch Jeffrey Sachs. I'm going to do a whole thing on Jeffrey Sachs because that guy, he's so obvious against this country. Well, maybe not against this country, but he's so in bed with this whole multipolar concept. It's just like he's almost becoming a whiny B-word about it. Like he was yelling on one podcast, like, people need to remember that it's a multipolar world now. They better start acting like it. He actually said that. And he seems frazzled. He was just on Tucker Carlson like today or yesterday. I was listening to that earlier. It got me off track, but I'm listening to him, and it's like now that I see this strategy that I've explained to you, it makes sense. Like their level of rancor, their level of desperation in their messaging is directly related to our level of success. And remember, we don't need to put boots on the ground to win what we want to win. If your assumption is that we want to completely beat Iran, you'd be right. But you have to think in asymmetric warfare terms. We don't have to put boots on the ground. You know why? What do you think happens with soldiers when they don't get paid? And if Iran doesn't have an economy, they can't pay their soldiers. Yes, it's terrible for Iran. Yes, that will cause chaos, but it will defeat their army. Okay, it will defeat their army because soldiers that don't get paid, they don't fight. And don't believe the hype, okay? Most soldiers are like 18 to 45 years old, tops. 45 be ancient in the military, in any military. They're not the same as the baby boomer class. The baby boomer class are all the revolutionaries. The younger people of Iran, a fair amount of them, and don't quote me on this, I know a fair amount of them, but I don't know all of them or many in the grand scheme of their 90 million person population. They really just want to live. And but unfortunately, there's really not a lot of internet access, and whoever's in charge of Iran is speaking for the Iranian people, which is being reinforced by the same woke Reich and multipolar influencer idiots like Owens and Greenwald and Carlson, all saying like, oh, the Iranian people stand firmly behind their government. No, they don't. We all saw it. But not only that, what is that government? What are they standing behind? Why would they stand behind them except unless a gun is put in their face? I mean, the Iranians government has constantly massacred protesters just right before this conflict. And I dare anyone to go into New York or Brooklyn or, Manhattan or parts of Chicago or Michigan. Find me an Iranian who's like, yeah, man, that government's the best. You're not going to. Okay, you're not going to. Now, Jeffrey Sachs, he'll meet with, and he's gone to Iran a few times, he's meeting with the government. So what do you think they're telling him? No, our people hate us, actually, Jeffrey. They hate us and they want to overthrow us. No, of course not. But these people want you to believe that we're the bad guy. We're the bad guy. Why do the multipolar people want you to believe that the U.S. is the bad guy? So they can get public pressure to force the government to pull back into our sphere of influence, thus lending into the whole multipolar strategy. Iran comes in because without Iran, the multipolarists especially, have no leverage at all. And so the questions I do have that I can't answer is why is China supplying both sides of the war in Russia and Ukraine? Because ultimately it will hurt China, and the Chinese are known for long-term thinking, so I'm surprised by that move. And also, the other thing I'd be really, really curious to figure out is why are the Europeans not playing better with us? Because eventually they'll need oil. And you think they're going to get a good deal? I don't think so. Now, we know why Spain's not playing, because Spain is indebted to China up to their ears. Actually, it was in spring of 2024 that Spain announced that Palestine's a state. Never had they done that before. And guess what happened 3 weeks before that? Oh, yeah. They got billions of dollars from China to build their infrastructure as part of the Belt and Road. So, just look at those things. And then China also kind of owns them. Remember that big power outage? Go back and watch my episode about that. Pretty sure China caused it because Spain was not playing ball with the pork prices that China started importing pork from Spain because they refused to import pork from the United States, and we used to be their biggest exporter of pork to China, which is their key source of protein. So they went to Spain. Spain started playing a little hardball with the prices. Lights go out. The next day, Spain's like, hey, we struck a deal on the pork. Coincidence? Maybe. But just saying, read the room. Read the global room. It's a lot of coincidences like that around China. So that's why Spain's being the way Spain's being. Keir Starmer, no idea. Maybe someone else can help me with that. And I know England well. I have no idea, where the pressure is coming from. I should probably reach out to my English friends. We were just there recently and say, what is up with that? So anyways, let me get to it's a lot of questions. All right, guys, I'm going to hit your comments right now. Otherwise, I'm getting in that rambling mode. So I will stop doing that. All right. Is that good? Venezuela is a communist country. What if one day they get free from America? They won't. We'll never let that happen again unless, we get another Biden in. But let me get back to you on that because I don't want to speak out of turn. I do know that Marco Rubio has been spending a lot of time not only in Venezuela, but also in Guyana, which is the biggest emerging oil power in South America right now in terms of how quickly they're growing in power and authority. And that's a smart move. We're also starting to plan joint military exercises with Guyana. So keep an eye on Guyana on this one, and I think that will lead to those answers. Tell everyone there isn't a chess game going on. This isn't a game. Jennifer, I know it's not a game. I'm a disabled combat veteran, so I don't take this stuff lightly, and I've lost a lot of friends in combat. But I will say, when we were explaining it to people, it's important to explain it in a gamified way so people can understand it. So I do try to separate emotions from analysis. Otherwise, you can't do good analysis. I hear you, but yeah, never ever think that like I take these things lightly, because I certainly don't. If it was a chess game, the queen always wins, and I'm done where. Look, that's funny. Nice play. That was good. That was good, Jennifer. Good one. I will check it out. If it's hello again, if it's a chess game, the queen has all the moves. Not necessarily, Jennifer. They have the most amount of moves, but they can quickly get surrounded and taken out, even sometimes by a pawn. So, there we are. Sounds like you're a chess player. Love to play chess sometime. If you want to figure out a way to do it online, that'd be cool. CFC, I was pro-Palestine. I was against the war in Palestine. But the war in Iran doesn't make much sense to me. And they seem more scripted than anything. I hope it makes more sense to you now. If you're the tough part about this time period is a lot of the people that are influencers for the multipolarists they tend to lean isolationist. That'd be nice. It'd be nice if we could all stay in our own region and live happily ever after, but the world doesn't work that way. There's always expansionists. And even though people call us expansionists, we're not really taking territory, except we do need Greenland, and I hope that happens. And I think, the Greenland people would love it too, because they're going to make a ton of money. But the point is, you have to look at it in terms of what do you think is important, not only for you, but for your country. And I believe that the most important thing for America is to be the global hyperpower, actually. Superpowers when you have two, hyperpowers when you have one. That's the most important thing. Okay, because like Highlander, if you're my age, there can be only one, and there will always be one. And China has stated very, very plainly they want to be the one. And I don't want China to be the hyperpower. They cannot be the hyperpower because just ask the Uyghurs or members of Falun Gong who occupy all of their re-education camps and are most likely used, based on numerous reports, even by the UN, for live human organ harvesting. They just don't have they don't put the same value on life we do. Not the Chinese people, but the Chinese government. And I do believe the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is a criminal organization. I really do. And the way they treat their people is horrible. And don't believe the hype. You always see these beautiful images of China, and it's so nice. I feel so free here, constantly hearing this from these podcasters. I've been to China many times. It's a nice place. It's horrible pollution because they have so many coal burning factories. I love the people, are super nice. I love the food, but they are not free. My translator couldn't even cross the street at a certain point in China because his social credit score was too low, and it activates, and his Bluetooth on his phone, which you can't shut off, was picked up by the crossing signal, which has a Bluetooth transmitter, and his phone went off like an alarm, and he's over, kind of arguing with the cop, and we had to walk like 4 blocks to cross the street. I mean, come on. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Let me see. I like to call it Goldwater. Goldwater's president 46, and we had a good, simple idea of simple good. Well, Vietnam's a whole nother animal. I can't go into that tonight. I'm going to have to go back to my college days and pull my books on Vietnam. But we inherited Vietnam, of course, from the French. Okay. And so they were observers, and we stupidly got involved in it. But, we're also fighting Cold War style wars back then, which were like containment wars. That's why we supposedly weren't taking territory in Vietnam, which led to a lot of deaths. There's a really good book by, I forgot the author, but it's called The Grand Delusion. It's about Vietnam War. I highly recommend it. I read it in college, but it made a lot of sense. The problem with the way we ran the Vietnam War, I think it was McNamara was the architect. We were doing a numbers thing. I think he came from Ford Motor Company on the numbers side. So his whole theory was, well, it's Vietnam versus the United States. We got more soldiers, so we're going to win through attrition at a minimum. What he didn't account for was China pouring in soldiers into Vietnam, fighting with the Vietnamese. That was a huge blunder. I don't, but yeah. So Vietnam, that's a different animal. And when you look at the Cold War style wars, which were about containing communism, they're kind of different. I would even say like the last Cold War style war was Desert Storm, Desert Shield, because we're containing something, and it's been said to be the last Cold War style war. So, but yeah, we could talk about, actually it'd be an interesting show to talk about Vietnam. I'd have to probably get a real historian on here. I'm, not a historian, though I like history, and though you need to know history to be an intel analyst, it doesn't make me a historian. But it'd be fun to get someone on here that knows a little bit more about that war than I do. All right. Trump is doing a good job. Cold War style war problem ended. Yeah, I hear you. All right. Everyone thinks that they have all the time in the world. Look at the toxicity of the planet. Oh my God, Jennifer, you're killing me here. Yes, I know. That's why it's good that China's production capability goes down, because they're one of the biggest polluters in the world. Okay. Easily. And it's really, really nasty about China and the environment. Like, China gets all this praise because, oh, look at all these solar panels and everything like that. Well, China pushed the whole green bullshit on the world because they're the mass producers of the equipment for solar panels and windmills and everything like that. Meanwhile, they have so many coal burning plants, not only in China, but what China does is they export their pollution. They offshore their pollution. What does that mean? Well, the Belt and Road, those are kind of like countries that they do these toxic financing deals with. They're kind of beholden to China. So when China wants another coal burning plant, they put it in a neighboring country. Guess what else they put in their Belt and Road countries? And you can find this in the congressional record. Nukes. So you think Cuba was bad? Imagine that 67% of the world is in the Belt and Road. And in Pakistan and several other countries, there are existing ICBMs from the Chinese. So, but yeah, they offshore their their pollution, and then that way they can have lower numbers for the international Greta Thunberg network of people, I guess. Don't do great term in midterms. We keep focusing on a reduction, putting money in special election more. Yeah, we need a lot of election reform for sure. But guys, look, even like, it's so important, like, you vote in the midterms. It's so important because it's not like things will get bad after Trump leaves office. Things will get bad in less than a year. Like, you think it was bad before with the Democrats in charge? As weak as the Republican Party is in terms of like the Congress and the Senate, think about what it's going to be like when you have a pissed off, vengeful Democratic Party in controlling Congress. You want to talk about open borders? Hell, they're probably going to like shrink our borders or so. I don't know, but it's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad. So yeah, like, I guess the thing to do is buy into ammunition stocks right now. But yeah, but it's so important because those same people that are pushing for the multipolar world, the whole network of people we discussed on a previous episode, but Tucker Carlson, Greenwald, Candace Owens, all this, Nick Fuentes, they're the ones that are, Jimmy Dore, they're the ones that are all telling people not to vote in the midterms. That's idiotic. They don't want you to vote because they want chaos. They want this country to get weakened, which lends to the multipolar vision. That's why they're pushing that. And I do want to point out to you guys, do a little historical research on Syria. Okay. You're going to find the same Jeffrey Sachs, the same Max Blumenthal's, the same Kim Iversons, the same Jimmy Dores. They were all like pro-Assad as well. And where's Assad living right now? The former president of Syria, in Russia. All right. Tell everyone, go pray and hope they are making the right decisions. You know what? Jennifer, I don't tell anyone to pray. I pray myself, but I never tell other people to make their bed. I make my own bed. They can make their own bed. People know what they need to do. And, some people don't pray. What I always tell people is this: take care of your house, take care of your kids, take care of your family. Once that is locked up, make sure you're doing your job well, make sure you have income coming in, make sure your family knows how to be a family. And then you reach out to the neighbors. Okay. And then you see if they need help. And if they're willing, then you help each other. Okay. And then you kind of expand out to the next neighborhood, and, start right there, start right here, and then expand out. But make sure your own house is in order before you start trying to put other people's houses in order. I think that's a problem with a lot of people, not you, but they want to tell everyone else to fix things and do things right when they themselves, and again, not you, but are not doing everything they can do to be like the best leader in their family or in their own life that they can. So I always say, if you want to make this world a better place, start with yourself. That's just my take on it. Geoengineering, weather manipulation, mRNA vaccines, gene editing, food modification in certain groups of people, acting like demigods because gods create supply to meet the demand. They can act all they want. But again, go back to, I think we need to get back to where a lot of people's thinking was, mine included, during the Biden administration. What I liked about that back then is people chose a topic and they hammered on it. And I think that's the most effective way to do things. I've had trouble getting out episodes because my mind is just so overloaded with like, what do I dive into here? And what I'm doing is I'm going back to the things that can affect me. Okay. And the things I've already done research on. So like the Iran thing, that's very important because that affects me. It's more than just gas prices. It affects everything because we have people cheering for Iran. And when I start hearing things from my 14-year-old's friends and they're confused about Iran, are they good guys? Are they bad guys? Like, that's bad, man. That means the influence is coming through TikTok. And getting to them. That means the influencers that I was hoping would stay isolated on things like X and Blue Sky, they're getting into the school systems. They're getting into the kids gossip. And, that to me, that affects me. So the reason the Iran thing is on my radar is because it's on the radar of the influencers I want to counter. Encountering them just through sharing information. But, it really became a thing because I had to explain to my 14-year-old, who's a very smart kid, like, no, that dude who left the CIA is not a good guy, that John Karaku, because he's like, Dad, this guy was talking about the Abu Ghraib torture and everything. I was like, that guy is not to be trusted. He works for the Russians. He outed a bunch of case officers. He's a total traitor. But it's so hard for these kids to dig into things the way we can. So what I recommend to people is pick a topic and be an expert on it and move on to the next topic when you're ready. But always pay attention to what your kids are saying, because if you want to pick a topic to dive into and counter and fight against, or find a battle to fight against, find out what your kids are being influenced to believe. And that's the thing that's the thing I have to go after. And that's why I'm on Iran. And every day he comes home, he has a new one. Like, hey, and he's smart enough now. He's like, okay, I don't have time to look into this, but I heard this. Is this true? So it's good he's asking those questions. And I tell him, yes, that's true. No, that's not. Here's why. I even volunteer to take as many of his football buddies to their practices as I can, because I got them for an hour. And they're very interested in hearing what I have to say because they get to ask me questions. I'm like, no, that's BS. Here's why. Here's where you go for that sourcing. And, don't just like research it and go on X. Research it and get into fights with your barber after he cuts your hair, or debates, seriously, like, because I'm here. I go to this Puerto Rican owned barber shop in Peabody. Great place. Okay, great place. And my barber and I, were debating on Candace Owens and all this. We don't agree, but we have good debates. But what's good is we shared our Instagram accounts and everything. We're exchanging information, and I'm listening to him, even though I don't like Candace Owens, but he thinks she's a good researcher. And I said, look, give me a chance to explain to you why I don't think she's a researcher at all. I think she's a propagandist. And to his credit, he's open-minded. And he's telling me, he's like, well, that's the stuff that's dominating Instagram. So that tells me another thing, like, okay, I need more of a presence on Instagram as well, because over on Instagram, a lot of people think Candace Owens and these multipolar people are good, and they're not, and I told him, I said, I always bring my receipts, so I'll never tell you to believe me without some receipts. He's like, she's a good researcher. I said, she's not a good researcher. I don't think she researches anything. She's a very good persuasion person, as Jeremy Boring laid out. So, all right. Let me see. Do you think we can ever get out of the EU? Well, we're not in the EU. I feel like the woman that's trying to make sure we get out. I think you're talking about NATO. Yeah. So NATO. Yeah. I mean, I don't even see the point of NATO at this point. Like, well, I do though. I mean, the point I see of NATO is a counter to Russian expansion into their idea of Eurasianism. And I think Trump's handling that really well by saying, well, build your army. You know what I mean? Like, the more independent the European nations are to defend themselves against expansion, the less we have to be around. Like, it is in our interest to make sure that they can defend themselves. It's not our responsibility, but we do need to counter these multipolar threats. But we also need to counter the threat that is brought on by the EU, and that is kind of like the global currency and the one world, and nationalism. Like, we've got a couple spheres of influence. Like, we kind of help one and it hurts the other. We help the other and it hurts the other one. But we have to be careful. It's a balancing act. Like, okay, move them along here and then move them along here, but don't let either one of them get too powerful. Because there's the America First vision of the world, which is that third influential globe or vision, I guess. And that's the one I'm with. And that's what people need to realize. Soros, let's call them the Soros network, the Dugan network, so multipolar, globalist, and then America First as the dominant energy supplier to the world. I'm in that camp. But when you look at the Dugan network, it's like, okay, they're a good counter to the Soros network and vice versa. So you got to balance that, otherwise we'll be fighting both of them. And it's kind of leaning that way now too. And I think these networks have figured that out. Like, hey, we might have to work with the globalists, or what the Duganites call the Atlanticists. We might have to work with them a little to go after this new globe of influence called the Trump America First, whatever you want to call it. Confusing, I know. So I'm going to move on. God's creation was making humans think they are better than God. I don't think all humans think they're better than God. I honestly can't even perceive. I believe in God. I can't perceive God because God is omnipotent and omniscient. So, I mean, I don't know how any mortal would think they're better than that. And how do you define better? I think as communities, people that are isolated from a community and other people, I'm not trying to sound like in a communist way, but you know what I mean? Like, I think when people are sucked into their computers and their screens, have less human contact, they can believe they're something that they're not, because who you are online is not who you are in the real world. I could be the most popular guy on X, but will that help my son get an A on his math test? Will that help my daughter get through a difficult time she might be having in a relationship? No. So I think people need to just limit like their exposure. Like you're not going to miss anything because things are moving so fast. No one's going to care if you, I guess. But I don't know. I just think there's an imbalance right now for a lot of people where they're living in the online world and not enough in the real world. And I think people need to balance that out again and get out there. And I hate saying touch grass. I hate that phrase, but there's a lot to be said about like starting your day outside. If you live in the city, starting your day with a walk or going to the gym or just going in. I like when we're in Brooklyn, we have the good fortune to live in several places. So we live in Brooklyn. We live way up in the country in the Hudson Valley, which is like we have bears in our backyard. That's super rural. And then we live in Salem, which is very suburban. So we get all experiences. But what I found is like even when it's like snowy and if I start my day outside and then end my day inside, I do a lot better than if I start my day inside and end it outside. And another thing I've started doing, and Naomi always does this, is I've started literally like getting rid of my phone at nighttime so it's nowhere near me because I was hearing on that Hubert guy, he's like the fitness guy, one of the worst things you could do is wake up and start scrolling through your phone. The first thing you should do when you wake up is get up. Get your posture, go get some sunlight. That's the very first thing you should do. And I've started doing that. I'm a lot more productive. But again, you see, you're healthier if you are away from the screen. Not saying the screen is bad, it's necessary, but don't start your day with it. Don't end your day with it. Of course, I'm ending my day with it tonight, but that's for your benefit. I forgot the name of the billionaire, but it seems like Trump is really copying him. You know the billionaire that, made the terminology, biz journalism. That's the guy who influenced Trump. Email me. You know what? Email me some of these questions. It might be easier because understanding your limitations, I just want to make sure I'm answering them correctly. I'm just going to throw my email there. That's my email. And we could just mention this show. So I know where you're coming from. But yeah, email me some of these and I'll try to get them. Yeah, Nick is in Rome at the moment. Lloyd Braun. Love that name. That's from Seinfeld. That's awesome. He's meeting with remigration movement in Western Europe. Okay. Fair enough. Wait, actually, have fun, everyone. Your games and lives are done. That's a whole poem. Let me remind you all the earth is alive. Okay. All right. I lost my place. All right. So I'm going to have to skip ahead to some comments. It's getting late. Okay. Sachs is nearly not welcome. I saw that in his slow, guarded speech. Oh, it's terrible. Did you see him like get into it with the Israeli foreign ambassador? It's crazy. But if you listen to Jeffrey Sachs, just go to like any YouTube video of Jeffrey Sachs, pull up the transcript, and then Control F, multipolar, and Control F. And also, I'm right now. I've got to check, but like I had AI pulling like comparing how many times he said good things about the United States versus bad things, and how many times he said good things about China and Russia and Iran versus how many good things he said about his own country. I haven't looked yet, but I'm sure I know those results already. Yeah, Sachs. Yeah, he's also one of the original Syria pro-Assad people as well. Back to Lloyd Braun. Love the name. Welcome. Lloyd and Nick at the moment, he's meeting with remigration movement in Western Europe. I'll check that out. I'll look that up. I think it's odd that Candace is also in Italy at the moment, in Rome at the moment. Yeah, I think what's going on in England with King Schumer is the Green Party is going to take over basically the DSA of England. Got it. That's good to know, the Green Party. Okay, I understand that reference. Have you checked out... I will check them out. Let me just write those down. So, and I have to write them down because this doesn't save the chats afterwards, but I am definitely going to... Actually, you know what? Let me just screenshot that. So yeah, that's where we're at. So again, I will get this entire paper up on Substack. And you can subscribe to my Substack for free. Paid subscriptions are always the best. They're like $7 just because I don't get paid to do this and it takes a lot of time. But if you can't, you can't. At a minimum, share the Substack if I can find it. Find my banners here. Okay, but well, anyways, it's just brianoshea.substack.com. But you can find it's Investigate Everything is the name of my Substack. Oh, there it is. Oh, it's scrolling on the bottom. I'm an idiot. Okay, so, but yeah, and I'll get that up. I also, by the way, for those of you that tuned in on my Paul Weiss special, we did have a mistake in that show, small one, but I did pull down the episode so I could correct that, and I will get that back up. For those that missed it, I've tied a lot of what's going on in the attacks on Kash Patel directly to Paul Weiss, the law firm that Donald Trump beat the hell out of in the beginning of his latest term. One of the loudest voices since the Kash Patel Atlantic story came out has been Chuck Schumer, and Paul Weiss works at Rob Schumer works at Paul Weiss. I think, and another lady, Loretta Lynch, she used to be the AG under Obama. She is a partner at Paul Weiss. She also is a key person in the Russiagate scandal, including the Hillary Clinton email thing. And Loretta Lynch was one of the first people to initiate the so-called investigation into Donald Trump and his bogus, his alleged and debunked ties to Russia. But it seems like Loretta Lynch may be the person who can be in a bad spot when Kash Patel starts issuing indictments for Russiagate. She also is at Paul Weiss. Schumer's brother's at Paul Weiss. There's like some key people at Paul Weiss. And one of the guys from my reporting, his name is Matthew Carhart, was at Paul Weiss until 2017. Then he joined the DOJ in Trump's first month in office. But while Loretta Lynch, Obama's AG, was still in charge of the DOJ, and that guy Matthew Carhart remains in the DOJ today. Okay, and Loretta Lynch went back to Paul Weiss where she had started. I find it odd. Like, I can't say that she hired this guy, but if you've ever heard the term embeds, there's a lot of embeds in the DOJ, meaning like Obama spies. So, DOJ, definitely take a look at this Carhart guy. I will state that the guy is married to a girl named Sarah Fitzpatrick. Sarah Fitzpatrick is also the name of the person that wrote the Atlantic article, but they are two different people. Okay, they are definitely two different people. I went back and I looked at the wedding photos, totally different girl. So don't fall into that trap. But yeah. So anyways, keep an eye on Paul Weiss, keep an eye on Guyana. We talked about that. And definitely going to take even more of a dive into Jeffrey Sachs. The other thing I do want to start looking at, and tell me if you want me to, but I've already started because I can't not look at it. These scientists, dead and missing scientists, it's getting a little weird, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. You may remember the guy that was shot at MIT, and then the shooter the shooter got to Boston, went down to Rhode Island, shot some random students, and went back up to Boston, shot an MIT guy, and then was shot and killed in a storage facility in New Hampshire. That whole thing is sus, and totally. And I started looking into it. Things moved on. I've got to look at it again because this kind of missing scientist thing is kind of freaking me out. I'm not going to lie to you. And that MIT guy was working in that space, not as a contractor, but doing a lot of like similar technologies. I can't really explain them now because I don't have them on the tip of my mind. But the point is, what I did discover at the time of that shooting is that Portuguese guy that they said killed him. That dude doesn't exist, man. And I'm telling you, like, he supposedly lived in this country for a while, and they were showing his house and everything. That dude doesn't exist. And I still have my notes on that, so I'll probably have to do another episode on that. And don't forget, the Luigi Mangione trial is still going on. I still don't think Luigi Mangione killed Brian Thompson. If you're new to this show, no, I'm not crazy. You can find it in my Substack. I think I covered it extremely well. I used to do murder investigations for defense counsel, so I'm not speaking out of turn. I know what to look at, and I know what looks right, what looks wrong. I'm calling it up right now, so you have it. But yeah, that I need to give you guys an update on that one as well. So, and I just want to show you what that one looks like. Yeah. So if you go to my Substack, here it is, you will see, definitely you want to pull this. This is a good, this is the way I used to do these murder investigations, is like with this level of detail. And I did this one way back, December 28th, 2024. But as you can see here, I go through everything from every photo, the fact that they misreported. They said they're looking for a male 5 feet 10 inches in height, in a cream color jacket, a black mask. So they're looking for this guy, and black gloves. Okay. But there's no gloves. There's no gloves. There's no cream color. There's no nothing. But there's not only that. I won't get into it. You can read it. But this is all people had to go on, and supposedly some girl that saw him at the B&B, like the name of the hostel, and at Amsterdam and 107th, supposedly recognized this from 10 days ago based on these grainy photos. And then I even went into mistakes that were made in the criminal complaints in both Pennsylvania and New York, inconsistencies in everything from how he was arrested to how the hell he made it 50 streets in New York in 5 minutes and change. Why is he carrying a bike battery when he supposedly rented a city bike where you can't remove the batteries? So you could see I'm just scrolling here, but I looked at everything, and there is no way. I even looked at every kind of type of bike they could have had. Yeah, I just don't think the guy did it, based on a lot of stuff, and there's a lot in here. So check it out if you get a chance. This one, it, to me, just really haunts me because. And by the way, Luigi Mangione never said, he was never political at all. All the things you hear about, like, he killed him for this, first of all, that's wrong. He hasn't been convicted of killing him. He's still in trial. But they also, like, I pulled everything I could. The minute his name came out, I pulled everything down I could before it got changed or messed with. He just, he was never political. He never mentioned Biden. He never mentioned Trump. He didn't mention healthcare because his family is in healthcare. They own the biggest nursing home network in Maryland. I don't even think they can put this kid in New York in December of 2024. Okay. He was there at the hostel in November before anyone even announced the United Healthcare investors meeting. It wasn't anywhere. There was no way he could have known about that investors meeting when they said he did. Just the whole thing stinks to high hell to me. So, and it's not that I agree with what people are saying or the shooter's reasons. It's not that. It's just the facts don't add up. This kid never actually made any statements against healthcare or anything. That all comes from people like the People's Forum, which is the Chinese-owned one, who also has been pushing for universal health care. There's a lot going on with this case, and it's still prescient, I think. So check it out if you get a chance. But yeah, I want to look at that, and I want to look at, I got to look at these scientists. It's freaking me out. And I still have to go way back, the beginning of the pandemic, and we have to reopen that Bing Liu case because we never, ever did. And that one still, in my opinion, remains wide open. Bing Liu was the guy who was supposedly going to unveil some data computational structure of COVID early on, and then he was from Wuhan, and then he got killed. He was also at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, and then he supposedly got killed by another gay guy named Hao Gu, who also happened to come from Wuhan. And they said Hao Gu killed Bing Liu because it was a lover's triangle or something like that, and no one ever heard any shots. And then Hao Gu committed suicide. I mean, the whole thing is weird. And University of Pittsburgh, a medical center, had just received like these multi-billion-dollar contracts from China, like, a few months before. Then you have this kid come along. He's going to say, "Oh, I'm going to reveal that COVID's bullshit," probably, and then he's dead. And it just went away so quickly, and no one's ever reopened it. So we have to get back to the true crime part of the Investigate Everything podcast. All right, guys, I've been rambling on for way too long. We'll give you a nice, clean, cut-up version of the topic of tonight's show. Those not familiar with my show, I do lives, and then we edit them down to a more tighter version where I'll have the maps up and all that kind of stuff. But I just like interacting with you and kind of giving you a preview of what's to come. We'll see when the next show is. I'll try to. We're going to shoot for Tuesday and Thursday. I talked to my producer, and then me and Naomi, we're going to try to shoot for a show every Wednesday, starting probably not this Wednesday or later this Wednesday, but we want that to be Wednesday at noon. That one's called In the Lair. It's a lot of fun. Naomi knows a ton about geopolitics, and so do I, and we disagree on a lot of it. We agree on a lot of it, but it is fun. It's frustrating for me, but people have fun seeing my frustration because it's like a husband and wife, and she's like, "Sit up straight, honey." And I'm like, whatever, so it's a fun show, but we do get a lot of information out there to you guys. So, and we have fun doing it. And it's always interesting to see her perspective on things, my perspective on things, and how those things coalesce. So anyways, keep an eye on Iran. Keep a wide. Remember, always zoom out and always zoom in. If people are trying to draw you into the argument that this is about Israel, you got to ask yourself, why? Why are they doing that? Most of the time when people want you to focus on a certain ring of the circus, there's two darkened circles they don't want you focused on. Okay, so keep an eye on those. And let's all get in the habit of in my opinion, it's okay to be proud to be an American, and it's okay to want America to be number one and a winner and the hyperpower. In my opinion, that's okay. We don't feel guilty about success. Don't feel guilty about power, especially if you've earned it. And I think us as a country, despite any of our flaws, we have earned it. I've earned it. People in uniform have earned it. People over in Iran or in that region are earning it right now. I do believe the Israelis have earned their right to be a country and survive, okay, as a country. We could get into Israel another time. They are our best ally in the region, okay, and they're a good ally because they give us they're like a big military base for us, okay, plain and simple. But we have other allies too, and I'm glad we're helping them. I'm glad we're helping Greece. I'm glad we're finally helping the Philippines because the other administrations didn't, and they're our allies. So it's nice to see America being America again, and it's okay to have powerful allies. And yes, you know what? Perfect is the enemy of good, okay? So we're a good country. Not perfect. I don't think any country is, but it's okay to be proud of that. It's okay to be number one. It's okay to be proud of being number one. And you don't have to make any apologies, okay, for being number one, ever, in your own life or as a country. So I hope this chess game of Donald Trump's continues. I see a checkmate coming up soon. I don't think it's all about Iran as the checkmate, but it's a big piece. It's a bishop on the board at a minimum, possibly a queen. But I hope it keeps going. I hope we win. Okay. And I hope our enemies lose, and I hope they lose bad. And I'm okay saying that. So, and I think all Americans should be okay saying that, but that's the beauty of America. You don't have to be. You could have a different opinion, and that's all right. All right. See you next time. This has been Brian O'Shea with Investigate Everything. I will talk to you all soon. Take it easy.